cutting into TV live? Because I'll go on you if you're doing that.
No.
Okay.
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 Yeah, you let us know when you're ready.
Good, everybody? Good afternoon. I'm Anthony Sizemore. I'm the police chief of the Cape Coral Police Department, and I'm joined today by our city manager, Rob Hernandez. It is with great disappointment that I announce that I have terminated Officer Davis Rios and accepted a letter of resignation in lieu of termination from Officer Josh Morgan. This stems from an internal affairs investigation which concluded that these two former officers violated department policy. On March 13th at 9:48 p.m., Jeremiah Ballum Jr., 22 years old, of Cape Coral, was reported as a missing person to our agency. Detectives from our Major Crimes Unit investigated, and through the course of the investigation, determined that Ballum Jr. likely was in a canal north of Southeast 46th Lane in our downtown entertainment area. Ballum Jr.'s body was located and recovered from the canal on March 15th. A death investigation is still ongoing. However, the preliminary cause of death is drowning due to an intoxicated Ballum Jr. falling into the canal. The Major Crimes investigation revealed that before Ballum Jr. was reported as a missing person, he had an interaction with officers. As a part of the review of the evidence for the missing persons case, body-worn camera footage was reviewed from the encounter between Ballum Jr. and our officers. The body-worn camera video from the interaction demonstrated several apparent policy violations. At first look, these violations seem so egregious that I ordered the Professional Standards Bureau to initiate an internal affairs investigation into the matter. The IA investigation concluded that there were in fact numerous policy violations. Therefore, after weighing all the evidence and the circumstances of the incident, I have decided that these officers can no longer represent the Cape Coral Police Department. Officers discovered Ballum Jr. passed out, intoxicated, in the roadway near Club Square in southeast Cape Coral. Body-worn camera footage captured the high level of impairment exhibited by Ballum Jr. Our officers did not summon medical attention. At no time did they check our record system for an address on file to give him a ride home. They did not attempt contact at his residence and locate a family member. Neither officer called a family member or friend on his behalf. They didn't assist in summoning a rideshare service or even make sure that he had a phone on his person to be able to call one. And finally, neither officer used a statutory remedy available to them, which is initiating a Marchman Act and taking Ballum Jr. into protective custody. Once Ballum Jr. was informed by the officers that any other interactions with Cape Coral Police Department that morning would result in a Marchman Act, Ballum Jr. stated that he would attempt to walk home. He then stumbled and walked away from the officers in the opposite direction of his stated residence. Hours later, when Ballum Jr. had not returned home, his family reported him as a missing person. I'm holding this news conference today because I believe we must be honest and transparent with our community so that we can quell any rumors and speculation and so that we may learn from this incident as an agency. I have high expectations for my officers to do what is lawful, moral, and just. And our officers have similarly high expectations of themselves, reflecting their ethics and character. But most importantly, the community that we serve has expectations that we must meet every day. Consistently, we do an admirable job of meeting and often exceeding these expectations. But unfortunately, these officers' actions, or in this case, inaction, were not in keeping with our vision, mission, and values. As Chief of Police, I owe it to the community to be transparent. I cannot stand up and trumpet our successes and accept our community's praise when things are good, but then shirk my responsibility to stand up and take criticisms in the event that we fall short. That's my job. As Chief, I have to own it and demonstrate accountability on behalf of the agency. I am confident that the men and women of the Cape Coral Police Department will continue to perform their jobs at the highest level of professionalism. This will help us maintain public trust, that public trust which is vital for us to carry out our mission. Effective leadership and strong organizations are not measured by the absence of mistakes by their members, but rather they're measured by the actions taken when those mistakes are uncovered. Do they hold their members accountable? Are steps taken to ensure that those mistakes are not repeated? The answer to those two questions is yes. It's the only option we have. And with that, I will take a few questions.
How many years of service did these officers have?
The first had roughly 12 years of service at various agencies. Worked for us years ago, left for another state on good terms, had a good record where he was, came back, had been with us for about a year. So we're looking at 12 total, but in this current run with us, just shy of a year. The second officer, 2 years with us, and 4 years total in corrections at another agency.
What was the time frame from the interaction with officers to the time when that he was reported missing and then ultimately found?
The time of the encounter with our officers, the time that our major crimes investigators believed that he went into the water was within minutes. Hours later is when he was discovered missing by his family and reported. And then through the investigation, we discovered his body roughly a day later. We had a good idea where he was through forensic evidence, feet on the street, investigative work, canvassing, and putting that all together. We had a pretty good idea where he was. So it's a tale of two different cases. We have the major crimes missing person investigation, which I would stand up here and say was ran flawlessly and effectively. And then within the entirety of the incident, we have a snapshot prior to that where our officers failed to live up to expectations.
Quick follow-up. I'm sorry, quick follow-up. Whenever on the years of service, the 12 years of service, which officer was that? Was that Rios?
Morgan.
Morgan, thank you.
What policy would have covered that interaction that they violated?
There's a technical term for the policy, but it was a dereliction of duty. It was under our code of conduct.
And the two officers, once his body camera footage was discovered, were they forthright? Were they evasive?
Very forthright. I will say some in the community have asked about these officers. We didn't select them to work here by mistake. They weren't somebody else's problems. We have a very competitive process to be selected to be Cape Coral police officers, and they succeeded in that. Both of these officers have been awarded for exemplary service in the past, and quite frankly, I believe that they were capable of providing exemplary service in the future. However, this incident was a violation of public trust that I believe was great enough that it eliminated that potential for them to be able to realize in the future.
Did either of them have prior issues within the department? Any prior red flag warnings, if you will?
None. That's what made it so shocking.
And do you have a more specific location on where the body of the victim was recovered from?
He was located from the canal on Southeast 46th Lane, immediately behind it. I would say probably in the 1300 block, west of Del Prado, east of downtown. So I believe you guys were there at the time that the recovery was made.
Could you just repeat the name of those two officers again?
Davis Rios, Davis Rios, and Joshua Morgan, Morgan.
Could you spell the victim's name for us, please?
Ballam Jr., Ballam, first name Jeremiah Jr.
One more time on the last name for me.
Ballam.
And then, sorry, an age on Jeremiah?
22.
Is he from this area?
I was a Cape Coral resident.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Could you also clarify, you said one handed in their resignation, was the other terminated from the department?
Yes.
Could you clarify which handed in resignation?
Morgan handed in a resignation in lieu of termination, and Rios was terminated.
Is the internal investigation complete at this point, or was this?
Yes, that's why we're here today. The instant I was able to come forth to the community by law is today, and that's why we're here today. As you guys know, Florida Statute 112 prohibits the disclosure of contents of an internal affairs investigation while it's going on. Once it's completed, then it becomes public record, and that's why I summoned everyone today.
And that body-worn camera footage obviously was enough to launch this investigation. Will that be made publicly available for the public, residents of Cape Coral, to see exactly what happened?
Well, I'm going to make it available to you as soon as we're done.
Thank you.
And that footage, was it discovered in the normal course of the missing persons investigation? or was
Yes.
it- okay.
Any others, guys?
Nothing further.
Okay, our Public Affairs unit has some material for you. They have the video, they have a little bit more biographical information on the officers. And if you have nothing else, we won't be doing any breakouts. So if you have anything else, now would be the time. If not, I appreciate everyone's time.
Thank you, Chief.